Alt space, would you like to do a sound check?
Yep. How's this?
Sound good, Jay, coming through loud and clear.
Great.
Sound check, alt space, sound check.
I hear you, alt space. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us this evening for our evening plenaries. This evening, it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Shannon Rupert. She is the director of MDRS, which is the Mars Desert Research Station in Utah. And she is going to be speaking about, is there life out there? Current biological research at the Mars Desert Research Station. Again, MDRS. Shannon, take it away.
Thank you, Carrie.
You're very welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Let me see if I can share my screen with you guys. How's that? Can you guys see that?
Yes, we have it.
I see your screen,
Okay.
but it's not in presenter mode. There we go. Perfect, Shannon.
Okay, so I should probably start by saying that I am at MDRS right now. So that means I'm on satellite internet. So I'm probably going to lag a little bit. Seems to be slower in the evenings, but at least there's no wind. So tonight I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the biology work that we're doing out at the station that is not crew related. So we talk all the time about what the crews do, and they do such amazing work, and we share that with you, but we seldom talk about the things that we do that are non-crew related. And so I asked a few of my good friends to join me tonight, and we're going to talk about 4 different projects that we are doing at MDRS. So this is my backyard, and as you might imagine, as a biologist, as a field biologist, I have all this terrain to wander over, and it seems kind of a waste that I'm here all the time, and I don't have much research of my own. I did spend 3 years mapping dinosaur bones. That was really, really fun. But since I'm a biologist, I would like to stay within my field. So we have 4 current projects we're going to talk about tonight. The first project we're going to talk about is the work that we're doing in the Green Hab on the design and implementation of a traditional agricultural system for Mars. And I'll share a little bit of that research. And then, like I said, I have 3 other people joining me. Attila, who's our assistant director, also was an intern and then became a formal intern and was working on a project on microbial ecology right before COVID hit. So he couldn't come to MDRS and do the work, but he wanted to do the work, and he kept at it and he kept at it. And the result of that is our latest project, which is this geomicrobial mapping and characterization of discrete, visually identifiable, lithologically based communities at MDRS. Yes, Penny came up with that title. It's kind of a placeholder, but basically what we're doing is we're looking at patterns and growth in desert varnish and lichen, and kind of seeing who's where and who's winning in the place where they are. We're very lucky we have 3 interns coming this winter to work with us on this project. And then our longest, Paul Sokoloff is going to talk about our longest running non-crew project, which is the Martian Biology Project, which we started, I don't know, we probably first came up with it in 2017. And this is every year we meet out at MDRS and we do biodiversity surveys. They're not Mars related. They're basically just a really, really good opportunity for us to contribute to the science in this area. And then the last project we're going to talk about is the NASA Spaceward Bound Utah project, which is a NASA grant funded project that brings teachers to MDRS. We're going to have our third cohort of teachers in about 2 weeks. And I'm super excited. This is an amazing program. The teachers are unbelievable. And I mean that in a good way. So let's talk a little bit first about this idea that we had to utilize our green hab in a way that will contribute not only to a more robust crop production system here, but also allow us to look into what people are saying about what we're going to do for farming on Mars, and try to put some of that into our program. Little background about greenhouses at MDRS. If you look at the upper left hand, that is the original greenhouse, that little round cylinder. A windstorm came up on Crew 4, blew it across the horizon, and we never saw it again. The next greenhouse was the one on the lower left. That's the one that most of you are probably familiar with. That's the Gary Fisher green hab. And it was built to be a closed loop water recycling system for the station and a greenhouse. Unfortunately, it was too small for the load of 6 people when we included the kitchen gray water, which we did. I wish we would have had an opportunity to alter the system a little bit and see if it would have worked. But it became so overwhelmingly lived in by E. coli that we couldn't even grow crops in it. Finally, we retrofitted it as a greenhouse. We started growing crops in it, and unfortunately, it burned the ground. So you might remember we crowdfunded a new green hab, and we built what you can see up at the upper right hand of this slide. And it was a geodesic dome. Once they built it, they realized there was no way to actually keep it wind and waterproof. And so being crowdfunded, we didn't want to tear it down, and you'll recognize it now as our science dome. And which I love that building, everybody knows that. And as a result of turning it into a science dome, we had to build a new greenhouse. We opted to build one. It's not the most flashy greenhouse. It's at the lower right hand, and that was built in 2016. So there are some assumptions that we use on our crop production at MDRS. And a couple things to remember. We're an operational analog, so we're not looking at high tech here, okay? We don't want a lot of bells and whistles in our system simply because it's super expensive and it's not really something that we do. We have been using traditional methods of growing things in soil because our assumption is that the soil issues on Mars will be worked out before we get there. And so we'll be able to modify Martian regolith and whatever else we need to grow crops there. We've done both aquaponics and hydroponics at MDRS. It's far too labor intensive for us to want to take it on. When you put those systems out in a field station type setting, and then you ask different people to learn how to take care of it on the fly, it just doesn't work. Our crop production here at MDRS is only for supplemental food. We are not growing enough food to keep the crews fed. And our model is for a Mars station the size of MDRS, so we're not looking at a settlement of 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. We're looking at, under a dozen people. Okay, so the first thing we learned when we got this new green hab is that crews don't want to plant, crews don't want to harvest. They do like spending time in the green hab, and they do enjoy having the supplemental food, but the actual taking care of it is too big a challenge. Part of that is that we have some really dedicated, amazing green hab officers, but a lot of the crews, that's kind of like the everybody picks a role, and then there's one last person and they're like, okay, well, I guess the only thing left is the green hab, and so I'll do that. And that doesn't bode well for crop production. A great example of that is the crew that just left. Inga, who was the green hab officer, had a lot of farming experience, and she actually harvested in more material in the 2 weeks that her crew was here than basically any other crew. And there's hardly any crops in the greenhouse right now. They're all just young because it's just the beginning of the season. So that was one of the things we learned is, I was expecting the crews to passionately want to grow their own crops, and nobody did. In 2017, I decided I was going to start all the crops, and we had a bumper year, and we have ever since. So I learned a valuable lesson. It's not that they didn't want to plant, and it's not that they didn't want to harvest. It's just that they really didn't know where to start. And so prior to the field season beginning, we plant the greenhouse completely. And then the crews, as they come in, they kind of have to maintain the crops. And I guess everybody is relatively good at keeping things alive, but they might not utilize the green hab in a way that they should. So then we decided to look at crop production over 2 field seasons. In 2018, 2019, we had a field season of 216 days, and we got almost 5,000 grams of harvested food from the green hab. About half of that was crops. That would be tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers. The herbs were about 20% of the harvested biomass, which is kind of interesting because it stayed that way even the next year. And the greens were about 36%. The daily harvest over that field season was 22 grams a day. The next year, and remember, this is a COVID year, so we only had 132 days in that field season. We harvested almost 4,000, which is an improvement. We're seeing about the same percentages, but we're getting about 30 grams of food for the crews a day. And that year we would have seen a much higher result, because we would have, if we had gone all the way through the year and not had to interrupt the field season because of COVID, because I had to give away all the plants that were in the greenhouse and they were just starting to produce. So 2019, 2020, we would have we would have had a really good year if we had kept going. So what we need to do, we need to select and or train our green hab officers so that they're more competent and more comfortable in the greenhouse. So that is one of the things that we're working toward. We have to record, we're going to record the harvest data just as we always have. And we're going to try to increase the harvest to justify the cost in time, energy, and resources, and especially water, that we're only seeing this small amount of food come out of the greenhouse. We're going to track those costs beginning with the Purdue crew in December, because from December on, we should have a full field season and no more travel restrictions to interrupt us. And then with the help of the 2 interns that we have coming this season, we're going to design a crop production plan that reflects what people think we're going to need on Mars. So we're going to balance what we have, what we expect on Mars, and come up with something that is practical that we can do that reflects current thinking of what's going to happen on Mars. And then we'll implement that design in a complete experiment in the next field season, so in 2022, 2023. We welcome anybody who wants to work on this project. I guess my one request is please don't try to sell me on hydroponics and aquaponics. We want to kind of support the assumptions that we've already made. And that's it. So I'm going to turn this over to the next speaker, who I've totally forgotten who it is. Who's next? Is it Jen?
Is this for your panel, Shannon?
Yes.
Okay, so it would be.
I don't know which of my.
We'll just ask if who wants to go next. I guess if it's Attila, Jen, or Paul.
Attila here. I'll be
That's
happy
perfect.
to-
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Attila here. I'll be happy to follow if that's all right with Jen and Paul.
Definitely.
Am I still sharing my screen? I thought I.
Yes.
You
How do
still
I
are
get
sharing
out
your
of-
screen. There you
There
go.
we go. There we go. Sorry, guys.
You're good, Shannon.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Attila, do you have a presentation to share?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Everybody does.
Perfect. Okay, I see your presentation. Now it's your presentation only on the screen. Go ahead, Attila. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Attila Mesaros. I'm the Assistant Director of MDRS, and I'm the lead of the biology project that we're going to do at MDRS in the next few months this season. Shannon said we've been working on this project for a while, and we are really excited to finally be able to execute it. So I'm going to talk tonight just a little bit, like just an overview of what we're planning to do the next few months. So as you probably guess, project is going to be related to cyanobacteria and also lichens, but most importantly, it's going to be about the geomicrobiology at MDRS. We want to focus on the interactions, not only between the bacteria, the microbe community, the surroundings, but also how they interact with the geology of the place. So in order to start, I'd like to talk a little bit about what desert varnish is. I don't know if many of you have heard it before. Actually, it was my first time to learn about it after we start this new approach of the project. So desert varnish, is this dark coating in the rock, in the surface of some rocks in arid and semi-arid environments all around the world. And some of the characteristics that it has is that it's very rich in clay minerals, iron oxides, but most importantly, I think the most defining characteristic it's very, very abundant amount of manganese. And one of the interesting things that we also want to understand is that why does it have so much manganese? It's a question that is still unknown, but most importantly, we don't know yet how desert varnish is formed. So we don't know if it's a abiotic process or a biotic process. So that's one of the questions that we want to answer, because we know, well, not answer, but we're gonna go around that's one of the big questions that we are gonna go around. And so we know that desert varnish shares a very complex bond with the microbe community. And one of the big questions that we have is that desert varnish biologically mediated? Also, we want to know which factors are going to determine the community compositions. So we have, I mean, like everywhere, we have, and sometimes we don't think that desert places will have such a rich communities, but they do. And we have the desert varnish community and the lichen community that they constantly interact between each other. So one of the questions that we have is how much they compete between them, how much they collaborate, which ones are the first to get there, and how they all interact with the desert varnish is one of the main concerns that we have. Also, what about its distribution? Why they're laid out in this position specifically? What are the benefits? Why are they behaving this way? Is basically what we're trying to figure out. And finally, well, not finally, but because we have a lot actually of questions that we're still working on. But we want to know if the desert varnish can be a reliable biosignature for future mission on Mars. We know there's a lot of rocks coating in Mars that share a lot of similarities with desert varnish. And this, if we somehow figure out how desert varnish is formed, and it is indeed biologically mediated, this could be a great opportunity for the use of desert varnish as a reliable biosignature. And that's pretty much it. We still are working on a lot of our hypotheses and our methodology, but we're real excited about this project, and hopefully our timeline is going to be, we're going to start in December, hopefully wrap it up around February, March, and looking forward to present it on the next Mars Society convention. I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, who wants to go next? Jen, Paul, jump in.
I'm happy to go next.
Thank you, Jen. If you wouldn't mind giving a brief introduction for the folks listening, that would be wonderful.
Okay. My name is Jen Carver Hunter. I am a 5th grade teacher in the Salt Lake City School District, and I have been on both of the Spaceward Bound Utah crews that we've had so far, and I'll be coming back as the crew commander for the 3rd crew in a few weeks to work with Shannon and Attila on that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Spaceward Bound Utah program. Can you, Carrie, can you see my presentation okay?
You look great and you sound great. Go ahead.
Perfect. So the Spaceward Bound program is from a 5-year NASA grant that was awarded to Dr. Shannon Rupert of the Mars Society. And it's designed to train the next generation of space explorers by having educators participate in analog experiences. And to date, we've had educators from 3rd grade up through high school, as well as informal educators who have participated in this experience. Spaceward Bound Utah began in 2019 as a means of providing a Mars analog experience for Utah teachers. And while most of the crews that go through MDRS have 2 objectives of the sim and the science, with the Spaceward Bound Utah program, we do add a 3rd objective, which is education. So we really have balanced our time in this experience with not only having the sim experience and the science exposure, but also increasing our content knowledge as well as our professional knowledge around the field of education. So sim pictures, of course, look very familiar, I think, regardless of what crew is on the sim. But we also do have different science things that we do. We've had collaborations on science investigations that we can take back to our classroom and differentiate from everything from an elementary level up to a high school level. We have analyzed specimens. We have searched for extremophiles. We've also conducted geology EVAs where we collect samples and to identify and use as analogs for what we are going to be talking about through the experience at the MDRS. In addition, we've done investigations with bacterial collection and analysis. And finally, the most important piece for educators that's different than other crews is the education piece. This experience gives us designated time for collaboration. So our hats never come off. If we're not doing science or actively on an EVA, we are collaborating. We are conducting professional development and exploring resources as well as any suggestions other people might have.
Jen,
we leave the
Hey, Jen.
yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but you're
We're both
we-
talking, sorry.
sorry, you go, Gary.
Your presentation started to go and then it stuck. So now it's back on the first slide.
Oh, let's see. There we go. Is that better?
It's on the education slide. Is that the slide you want to be on? Okay,
Yes, that's where I want to be. Thank you for that.
thank you.
As we are part of this program as educators, we lead with resources. We lead with a greater professional network of teachers who are passionate about the same depth of education that we all are, and we leave to go back to our students and develop a love for Mars in our students, so that we can hopefully encourage the next generation of space explorers. And that's what I have to share about the Spaceward Bound Utah program.
Thank you very much. Exciting stuff. I'm always excited to hear all the things that are happening at MDRS. I have not personally been there yet, but I hear I work very closely with Shannon and the crews there. I get to talk with a little bit. So thank you very much for your experience and your presentation. That was wonderful. I do believe that the last speaker for your panel is going to speak. Are you ready?
All set
Paul?
here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can hear you, Paul. Do you have a presentation to share?
I do. I'm just going to start that right now.
Okay.
All right. You should be able to see that okay, I hope.
It is sharing now. You are good to go.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone. My name is Paul Sokoloff, and I'm a botanist at the Canadian Museum of Nature in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, where I live and work on Algonquin and Anishinaabe land. And today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the research that we're doing in terms of biodiversity of the analogs around MDRS. So, when we think of the Mars as a research station, we think of it as this operational analog, which is amazing. And we've had so many wonderful crews go through and figure out, okay, how can we live and work on Mars? But we also have the broader environment, which is situated around MDRS that is incredibly biologically rich, as you've probably gleaned from Shannon and Attila and Jen. And so, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what we do botanically there for our biodiversity research. Of course, I couldn't start off a Martian botany talk without a quote from Mark Watney, which I've modified a little bit here. I think the original quote is, "Mars will come to fear my botany powers," but ours is appropriate because this is the work of an amazing group of people. So the Martian biology program is the brainchild of Dr. Rupert, myself, David Murray, Samantha Macbeth, Mike Irvin, Jeff Zarella, all these amazing people who have contributed over the years. So we all know what a botanist is, right? Mark Watney is a botanist. Well, we're not those kind of botanists. We're not growing things in metabolic waste products, fortunately. No, we're the kind of botanists who are actually interested in what kind of plants are in the environment around us. How can we tell them apart, and how can we communicate that information to other folks? So what we use is, instead of potatoes stored away for Thanksgiving, we use things like a quadrat and a plant press to essentially, and then our own intuition about environments, and as Shannon mentioned, wandering. We go out into the landscape and we are essentially search out all of the different microhabitats that surround MDRS and make collections of the plants, the lichens, the algae, and the mosses that grow in that area, so that we can preserve these specimens and examine them to identify them to species. And so what we do essentially is we go out, we collect a plant, we bring it back to the Science Dome, we put it in a plant press, which you can see an example of it here, state-of-the-art technology circa like the 1800s. And then once the specimen is flattened, essentially between sheets of cardboard and dried out, we mount it on sheets of acid-free paper with a label that says where we collected it and when we collected it. We deposit a set of these at the Intermountain Herbarium in Utah, and also a set here at the Canadian Museum of Nature. And within those libraries of dried plants, we essentially have a single specimen represents a data point saying that this particular species was collected at this place and at this time. So we have physical proof that these species are found in and around MDRS. So as Dr. Rupert mentioned, we started this program back in 2017, and we actually did some collecting before that in 2014 as a part of the initial trial run with Crew 143 for what was then the Mars Arctic 365 mission, and which turned into the incredibly successful Mars 160 mission. So I have done sim collecting of plants in a simulated spacesuit, as you can see here. It's not the greatest. It's actually a little bit better to do it out of sim, which is why we've been doing these Martian biology programs as non-crew projects. And so we've been going as much as we could. We were hoping to go last year, but COVID. And with any luck, next year we'll be back in the deserts of Utah, figuring out what kind of plants and other organisms are there to contribute to this bigger mission profile that we're working on. So in terms of vascular plants, and these are things that are mosses, so trees, things that have roots and shoots, we have found to date 81 taxa within the operational area around MDRS. And I say taxa, not species, because some of these things we actually haven't identified at the species level. In particular, there are some endangered cacti that are in and around the Mars Desert Research Station that are federally listed. So we don't collect them, but we do examine them in situ, and we come to at least the genus that they are. But there's an incredible amount of diversity in vascular plants surrounding the station, and in an immense array of microhabitats that provide shelter for different groups of organisms to grow together. And I should mention too that there are high levels of endemism in the area south of the San Rafael swell where MDRS is located. Endemism means these organisms are only found there and are found nowhere else on the planet. So, this is an incredibly rich area to be conducting field botany programs in. So, as we were talking about wandering, it's just exciting. All right. We're also working on lichens, which will be really useful, we know, not only to Attila's project, to many other research programs that are looking at microbiology and geomicrobiology around the station. To date, we have 13 species of lichen recorded from around MDRS. You can see some of them here. And this one in the middle, actually, this white cracked one is called, and the Latin name is Acarospora strigata. And I forget what the English name is at the moment, but it is the #1 most common lichen species around MDRS. It's everywhere, it's abundant, and having that identified as species makes it a good model organism for future studies. We have 13 species so far, but we're relatively certain that's going to go up thanks to the amazing efforts of the Mars Desert 80 team, including astrobiologist Anushree Srivastava, who is here, who has collected a lot of lichens, and who I'm working, these collections that I'm currently working on with colleagues at the museum to identify. Lichens are interesting because unlike vascular plants where we have just to look at them physically to key them out, lichens actually require specialized identification techniques, things like TLC, thin layer chromatography, and also chemical analysis. And so going through that actually provides some interesting science return in terms of how do you do science in the field. We've worked a little bit on the biodiversity of microbial green algae and cyanobacteria that occur endolithically around the station. We've identified 6 taxa, and that was all done morphologically. So all done by looking at the species under a microscope and identifying them based on visible characteristics. This shows a bit of a limitation in that I'm certain that if we did a genetic study, we would get a higher level of, okay, these are the number of taxa that are here. But that provides an interesting contrast for old ways of doing things and new ways of doing things. And we'll need multiple tool sets when we're examining both, searching for life on Mars, but examining life here on Earth. And so after all of that, you may be asking, okay, what does this have to do about Mars? There are no plants on Mars. We're looking for life, but it certainly won't be anything that you can stuff inside a plant press. And the answer to that is twofold. The first being that we have at MDRS this amazing analog area. And by better understanding the biodiversity and the botany and the lichenology of this area, we can better characterize it as an analog. By knowing what's there, astrobiology crews and crews going to the station have a baseline to work from for their own experiments. But the second reason, and one that motivates a lot of us, is that we all really want to see crewed exploration of Mars. We really want to see people go there, but we also know that we have a pretty amazing planet here too. And at the end of the day, once we do hope that we'll eventually have people on Mars, we'll want to have this amazing place for them to come back to. And by better understanding the environment of this really unique desert, we're better able to do things like understand how endangered species live in this area, understand invasive species and how they spread in the area. And that gives people like folks at parks and land managers at BLM the ability to better understand the area and give back a little science in this place that so many of us have come to know and really love. So that's in a nutshell, what we're doing with the group. Our future work is to hopefully go back this coming year and expand this beyond the flora and look at some of the fauna, things like insects, arachnids, and do some mammal and bird surveys in collaboration with other scientists in the area. And of course, we always have, Dr. Rupert wanders around the station sending us cool pictures of plants. So we're always so keen to get back there. If you're interested to read up a little bit more, you can find our current work published in the Biodiversity Data Journal. And I think that might be the end of all of us speaking. And we have time for questions.
Thank you so much, Paul.
Yes.
The work that you guys are doing out there is absolutely incredible. Shannon, did you have something to add?
No, well, yeah, I guess, aren't I lucky to work with such amazing people?
Absolutely.
We're lucky to work with you.
It's not easy being out
Thank
at
you, Paul.
MDRS like Dr. Rupert is. So kudos to her for sure. The incredible work that she is doing with all of the crews that she has come out there to work together. It is not easy. So thank you very much, Shannon, for everything that you do out there. And Attila and Jen and Paul, thank you very much. Let me see if there are any questions for any of you. If you are in the audience and you do have a question for them, please feel free to put your question in the Q&A section. I did have one question. Attila did answer, but maybe you could give some more specifics on this question. What is the area of your greenhouse? Perhaps what it's made of, how it's structured, etc.
Oh, so the greenhouse is 12 feet by 24 feet in size. It is if you want to know a secret, it's not actually a greenhouse, it's a single car garage because we were unable to get the greenhouse that we ordered. And so it's a single car garage kit that's been covered in greenhouse material as opposed to just, standard metal. And it has heating and cooling. we have grow lights for when we start seeing some flowering. I increase the light because we grow from October through about April. And of course, in the winter, I always like it when I first start growing in the fall, because the seedlings are like, what the heck? Why? Wrong time of year, lady. And it always just kind of cracks me up. Is there any specific questions about the greenhouse?
I'm just going through the questions now. And one question was, is there any particular time that you need help with the greenhouse, or is that even an option?
Yeah, I mean, we start planning in September or October. September, it's really too hot until the very end. And then it gets hot. It's too hot at we shut down at the end of April. So that's our active growing season. But we'd like to have, brains on board all year round that have, to work on this project with us.
Wonderful. We're going to go out to the AltSpace VR. Can you hear me? AltSpace VR?
Are you able to hear us?
I can
you
hear
hear us
you
okay?
now. Do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. This would be, I think, for Attila or Paul, and your work with the lichen. It sounds like you might be looking into the patterns of them competing with each other. And I'm curious, have you found any that you maybe can find analogs that you can model with the Turing patterns? If you're familiar with those, the mathematical patterns that show things like zebra stripes and bacteria colonies and things. If you're familiar with that concept, Turing patterns.
Actually, no, that's my first time hearing of that. But you mentioned competition, and certainly there are aspects of competition within some of the lichen species around MDRS. But there's also parasitism amongst different lichen species too. In fact, some of the lichens are obligate parasites on others. So there's also a lot of as Attila and Shannon can speak to, desert soil crust communities that are interwoven that maybe follow those patterns.
Interesting. Yeah, it's something I recently discovered too. Alan Turing, the guy who worked on our code breaking and those in World War II, he also did some work in biology and understanding some of that. So it was something I recently discovered. Turing patterns. Look into that. It'd be kind of cool. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Thank you.
I have to say the AltSpace VR interaction during this convention this year is incredible. Our next question comes from Peter. And I know that you briefly touched about this, but maybe you could go into a little more depth. What forms of heating and cooling systems do you have for the greenhouse?
Okay, so the greenhouse is heated in the winter by a greenhouse, a traditional greenhouse heater. It's propane. It's temperature controlled. For cooling, we have a swamp cooler, basically, and it's not effective all of the time. We also use a lot of different shade cloths because even now, the temperature can get pretty warm during the day. Right now I have a 90% sunshade on, and probably in another couple of weeks we'll switch it out to 40 or 50. But we're definitely heating every night now. And but we have, you know, the green hab is filled with seedlings and little guys that are only, you know, 4 or 6 inches tall.
Thank you, Shannon, very much. I have one more question. And it's from Eric. And he asks, what are the most promising crops to produce food oils? And he was wondering if sesame is at the top.
You know, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, when we started growing food in the green hab, it was relatively easy for me because I've worked in greenhouses my whole life. My family were organic farmers, and then I did a lot of work at university in greenhouses. But I hadn't given a lot of thought to, you know, what exactly would be required on a Mars mission, certainly early on. And then it was funny, the first few years, it was like whatever seeds I could find at the end of the season. And now I remember to buy the seeds in the summer, and I know exactly what I want to buy. But we're not, I mean, we're very slowly stepping into things like medicinal plants. You know, the first thought was like, oh, let's grow greens and let's grow tomatoes. I love cherry tomatoes. And so we haven't really thought beyond what would be, you know, kind of plants that would make the crews feel like they were getting a gift out of the greenhouse. So I don't know. That's a really good question. And it's certainly one of the ones that we'll want to ask. I listened to a talk earlier today, and they were talking about all the starches, you know, and all the, you know, the wheat and the corn and the cassava and all of these things. And I thought that's really interesting because we don't actually grow a lot of those. Part of them is the practicality of having, you know, a 9-month field season, and the other part is just that it was such a struggle just to get crops to grow and to, I mean, you would not have believed how hard it was to actually maintain a greenhouse here for the time that we do. And it's not necessarily that because we don't have a lot of technology, and so people will argue, well, yeah, sure, because you don't have this really sophisticated setup. And that might be part of it. Part of it too is, you know, everything you do on Mars is going to be hard, so much harder. If you'd have told me that, you know, 5 years after actively starting a greenhouse program, that we would only be this far along. And part of that is just, you know, being busy and having other things, then it's more important to just get food that they can grow. But also, everything out here is really hard. It's you know, a crew can expect to do about half of what they think they can do, even if they have reasonable expectations. Everything is just a lot harder. And so that's a great question. I'm looking forward to actually exploring what would be, you know, what would be the best crops instead of what is the easiest and quickest growing, so that all crews can have a little bit, you know, the idea is that at least if you're growing a lot of greens, and we grow a lot of greens, then every crew gets to at least experience harvesting. So, you know, that is a great question. And now I want to know.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. One more question. What is something very unusual that the crews have made from something that they've harvested there, but was that they all enjoyed, but was highly unusual?
Unusual. I will tell you that the not unusual thing is pizza. I mean, I think almost all the herbs that are ever harvested are for pizza. let's see, I can't oh, I know what the most unusual thing is we were growing zucchini and I got a message asking if they could pick the zucchini flowers and eat them.
Oh.
And so if you actually look at the data, it shows that like we harvested 4 grams of zucchini and you're like, how can that even be a zucchini? Well, it was just because it was zucchini flowers. So, and apparently wherever the crew was from, I can't remember, it's a very common thing for them to eat. And so they wanted to eat that.
That's amazing. We do have time for a couple more questions.
Cool.
I have one coming right now. George asks, since crops will be grown in a greenhouse on Mars, and the growing times are fixed seasons like on Earth, or is there a way to possibly grow crops year round?
Oh yeah, we'll be able to grow crops year round. I mean, the one thing about traditional agricultural methods is that we know how to, trick plants into flowering when they don't want to, or like I said, these little babies, they pop up and they're like, whoa, where am I and why am I growing at this time of year? And so we'll be able to have year-round crops, and even in the time that we're here, we turn over quite a lot of herb and greens. So even though for our crops, those things like onions and tomatoes and zucchini and cucumbers and peppers, we only get one crop during the field season. The other things are constantly turning over, and so we could definitely grow year round. And if you think about it, if you followed agroecology practices, which we sort of do on a very, very minimal scale. If you notice the picture of the plants growing, our herb garden is actually a recycled, reused aquaponics bed. And we grow carrots in an aquaponics bed too, because it's deep. It's the one that have the fish in it. And so you can have a schedule that allows you to take advantage of rotating your crops even in a tiny environment like what we have.
Thank you, Shannon.
Although sometimes it is a challenge. Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to figure out how much light everybody should get when somebody's doing one thing and some other plants are doing something else. And so it's a bit of a balance trying to figure out how to keep everybody happy.
I'm sure. I just try to grow my garden here in Colorado, and I don't have the situations that you have at MDRS, and I have a hard time here. So your crews and you must do an amazing job out there to grow things, because that environment is not very friendly sometimes. I do have to say, I have a comment from Tom. He said his wife loves zucchini flowers in Italy. So that's a real thing.
Oh, okay. Cool. All right. Okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions? I think I have one more question. Peter asks, have you tried growing leeks? They have a long life in Brazil.
No, we haven't. And I'm not really sure why. I mean, I grow things somewhat related to leeks, green onions, and I love leeks. I'll look into that. That would be a good one. That would make me happy. So I'll check into it.
Well, we do have about 5 more minutes. I don't have any more questions at this time, but Shannon, Attila, Jen, or Paul, if you have anything that you would like to add, to the end of your panel, please feel free to at this time. We have about 5 minutes.
Well, I'd like to bring up the fact that we're very excited to welcome our first interns in our new intern program this field season. We have, it was really funny. I guess I'm so used to putting crews together that when it came time to select a single intern, instead I saw these amazing teams of interns, and I don't know where they're all going to sleep because I got a little over exuberant. But we have three interns coming to work on the astrobiology desert varnish project. One is a grad student who's actually worked with Penny Boston, who's on this project with us in the past, and then we have two other, one is a recent graduate, and our third intern is a early college, first in her family to go to school person. And they just, together, they made this amazing team, and none of them had any field experience. And I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be so cool. We're gonna bring them out. We're gonna have them doing all this field work. It's just gonna be mind blowing. And then for the agroecology program, which is the greenhouse work, two of the applicants, one was very interested in crops and genetics, and the other one was all about the technology and the management of the system. And together, they just made like this perfect team. And so I ended up inviting them all. They're all going to be here through probably mid-December to mid-January. And even though we've remodeled the intern trailer, we still don't have enough beds for everybody. So, but I have a couple months to figure that out. I'm super excited to welcome all 5 of them. And, you know, it's that we have more interns this season than we've ever had. And all the other times that we've, Attila being the first intern that's come, we've only had 2. So it's going to be very exciting around here this winter.
Yeah, and I just want to say that I'm very excited to see. I mean, I was the first intern not that long ago, and then we had David and Lauren, and I'm just very happy to see the program keeps growing with the time, and just we have more people on board on our ship.
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot Lauren. Lauren actually never made it out to MDRS. I hope she gets out of here sometime. She was our intern during COVID. So, and she has remarkable organization skills. I wish I had some of those. You know, I learned a lot from her. The other thing I want to mention is that we do have cohort 3 of the NASA Spaceward Bound program at the end of this month. And I'm really excited before they come, we're having a reunion of cohorts 1 and 2. So these teachers, they just blow me away. Jen is an amazing, amazing person, and she's made it, her enthusiasm and her wonder at everything that we have here has just made her the perfect commander. Because she's so inspiring, and I'm so excited that they want to come back, and we're going to put together these kits that are part of the program. We decided very early on that we didn't want to make curriculum or that there was so much curriculum and so much information online that we really wanted to put physical things in the hands of other teachers. So we've developed these kits that contain books and activities, and those will go to Utah teachers, mostly middle grades that aren't able to come to the program for one reason or another. And so they're going to come, we're going to put those together, and we're going to have a Halloween party. I'm so excited about that, even though I hate Halloween parties. And so it's just been an amazing program. I'm really proud of it, and I'm really impressed by it. I mean, I know it's my program, but I'm still impressed by it.
Well, you should be. There is amazing work being done at MDRS. So this is going to conclude this first hour of this evening. Dr. Shannon Rupert, Director of MDRS, Mars Desert Research Station, thank you very much. Thank you, Attila. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Paul, very much for joining us. Continue to do your good work out there. It's absolutely amazing. Our next.
Thank you, Carrie.
You're very welcome. Thank you all. I hope you enjoy the rest of our convention for the next 2 days. And upcoming next, we have the crew of the MDRS Crew 245. And I would like to introduce Ron Craig. He is the host of Red Planet Live podcast. His name is Ron Craig, and I'm going to hand it over to Ron to introduce the crew. Ron, can you hear me?
I can, Carrie. Thank you very much for that introduction.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce. It's actually my pleasure. I'm actually really excited to talk to these individuals again. I actually had them on my show not that long ago, and they were fantastic. So I know everybody is going to really enjoy what they're going to talk about today. So I'm going to introduce the crew. So Crew 245, so their mission date was April 11th to the 24th. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share out some little slides I hope to keep myself in check. So let me just share this out here. I believe I'm allowed to do that, right?
Yes, you should be. You're a co-host, so you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's give this a try. Awesome, I see it. Okay, so if you guys can let me know if you can see that slide or not.
I do see your slide. It's in presentation mode. I'm sorry, it's in slide mode, not presentation mode.
Okay, let me try this. How does that look?
You are perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so here we go. So here is the crew. So Crew 245. So first up is the crew commander, Dylan Dickstein. So Dylan Dickstein is an aerospace, sorry, I'm gonna move that out of my way, engineering PhD candidate at UCLA, studying thermomechanics in hypersonic vehicles. Dickstein is a pilot, scuba diver, inventor, published author, professional photographer, and marathon runner with work experience at SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, United Launch Alliance, and the Aerospace Corporation. And one sec here. I see how it likes to make so my screen, I can't see all the text. So just give me one sec here. I'm gonna go back to slide mode. Aerospace Corporation is also a member of the Explorers Club. So sorry about that. And next up is Shravan Harahara. So Shravan Harahara is an aerospace engineering graduate student at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, researching Martian Institute Research Utilization, ISRU. Haraharan is an avid musician, tinkerer, and citizen of the outdoors who has previously worked at NASA, Northrop Grumman, Spin Launch, Blue Origin, and the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And up next is Olivia Etten. Olivia Etten has earned a bachelor's degree from UCLA in molecular cell and developmental biology. Etlin is a scuba diver, water skier, wilderness first responder, and a hobby aquarist. She is a lab technician in the Gutman Lab for ink RNA biology at Caltech, where she performs experiments to help better understand RNA protein interactions in several models, including the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And after her is Alex Koltrup. Alex Koltrup holds an MS Spaceflight Human Factors with a focus on microgravity operations and is a graduate of the International Space University's Commercial Space Program. She is a student pilot, first responder, always in training, and former US rowing national team athlete. Coultrip works at NanoRacks in the Commercial Space Stations Organization and has a background in space policy and human psychology in space.
Hey, Ron,
Yeah,
you are in slideshow mode.
yeah, I have to because of the way that it's.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you until you had all of them, but you have one more to introduce. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Yeah, I had no choice. That's the way it's covered my screen up.
Yep.
So up next is Shayna Hume. Shayna Hume is a PhD student in aerospace engineering at CU Boulder, researching Martian entry, descent, and landing algorithms. Hume is a perpetual explorer, a student pilot, scuba diver, and hobbyist. She has previously worked at NASA Goddard, Lockheed Space Martin and Aeronautics, the Aerospace Corporation, and is currently co-oping during her PhD at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. And last but not least is Julio Hernandez. Julio Hernandez is a PhD candidate in aeronautical and astronautical engineering at Purdue University. At Purdue, Julio is conducting research on multifunctional composite structures with self-sensing properties to develop a structural health monitoring tool that couples vibration and connectivity-based techniques. Julio is also passionate about peer mentoring, botany, space sustainability, and cooking. After completing his PhD in the spring, he hopes to continue to refine his research skills at a national laboratory and make impactful contributions to the space industry. So here we have it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my screen share away, and that way we can get the crew up on the screen. And there we go.
Hey there.
Hey, how's it going, Dylan?
Hey, doing great, Ron.
Hey, awesome. So I'm just going to bring up my, so we wanted to talk about, I know you guys had some points that you wanted to go over to today. So Dylan, for the first point that we wanted to go over was formation of a team. So take it away, sir.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So I want this to be as interactive as possible. I know it's difficult with the virtual, but everyone's staying up late, or if you're outside of North and South America, maybe it's really early for you, but please be active in the chat. We want to see everyone's responses. Yeah, I'd be curious to know first if anyone in the chat has applied to MDRS, because it's something worth doing, in my opinion. Personally, about 3 years ago, I learned about another friend of mine, a colleague who went to MDRS, and I was curious because at the time I was starting to look into what to do after studying aerospace engineering at Cal Poly at San Luis Obispo, and at some point I had the fortune of working alongside Bob Benkin and Doug Hurley at United Launch Alliance, and suddenly the idea of pursuing astronaut as a career actually was something I started to consider. And thus MDRS made a lot of sense. And so you have the option to either apply as an individual or apply as part of a team. And it was recommended to me to choose the latter. And so then I sought out to reach out to former colleagues, friends, people I've worked with in the past, or fellow students. And we end up pulling from the Matthew Zockwitz Fellowship Program, which is an incredible program in itself. We also have a member from UCLA, where I'm a graduate student, and we also have a buddy of mine who I met through grad school applications at Purdue. And so together we're a team of 6, and we're very happy to be here and talk about MDRS. And again, please leave your questions in here. We want to hear what you have to say.
Awesome, thank you, Dylan. So up next, actually, we want to talk about the scientific objectives. So I believe Olivia wants to actually take that question away. So if Olivia, if you want to jump on and take it away.
Yeah, definitely. And thank you for the really nice intro, Ron. So I was the crew scientist for our mission. So on top of just living life as astronauts on Mars for our 2-week simulation, we wanted to sort of emulate the types of research that people living on Mars, or the first astronauts on Mars, likely would be doing during their time there. And as Shannon mentioned in her panel, just before we came on, she talked a lot about like the botany garden, the greenhouse, everything like that. So I won't get too much into the nitty gritty, but our goal as a team was to do the sort of research that would hopefully, inspire the next generation of scientists and astronauts. So for example, we had a garden, we had a hydroponics garden. I'll pass it off to Julio in a second and he can talk about his regolith feasibility experiment. But we wanted to do some experiments that we would be able to communicate to others. And through outreach, once we leave MDRS, we wanted to be able to speak to classrooms, astronomy clubs, and things like that to let them know that, being on Mars isn't just for, astronauts, people that want to be, there just to explore space. It's for all types of researchers as well. So Julio, if you wanted to talk a little bit about your experiment, and then maybe you can hand it off to the next person.
Yes, thank you, Olivia. That was a very good summary. For my work, I was the crew botanist for our team, and I had done a feasibility study in which that I was exploring what if we were to take a initial amount of Earth soil to Mars with us and introduce some of the local Martian regolith after you were to process it to remove any of the chemical perchlorates that are in the soil to expand your production. So what Olivia had done was she took it from the angle of a hydroponics, which is a fairly sophisticated method of producing your agricultural produce, but I wanted to do something a little bit more traditional. What I found was that my plants there didn't really like the Martian regolith so much. It's very much a very poor medium to grow anything in. But we also had an additional experiment that the Alex had brought in which that she had grown a few pea seeds within a gel suspension.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you,
so
Lily.
the gel suspension growth, experiment that Julio mentioned was kind of riffing off of his, measurements and his practices for mixing different soil mediums. But we wanted to make sure we were hitting all of our targets and trying to germinate seeds in as many mediums as possible.
Awesome. So I think up next, we wanted to actually talk a bit about the scientific results, because you were there to perform, a lot of experiments and a lot of trials and tribulations and, as an analog astronaut. So I think, this question, will open the floor to all of you and just, go from there. So, you're up now. So you want to take it away, and then we'll kind of just go through all 6 of you and see what your, kind of your part of the mission, and maybe just kind of put a little bit of input and into what actually happened there.
Yeah, definitely. So what we really wanted to do was use our time at MDRS as sort of an education tool. So of our experiments, we've started making some YouTube videos. Hopefully that'll be accessible to anyone with internet access anywhere, so they can kind of see what life is like on Mars. We gave like a little station tour of MDRS, of all the buildings that were there. And we do check-ins halfway through the mission and near the end and at the beginning, just to, so they can see how our minds are changing, as we're living there. I would say most notably for our results, so I'll talk about the astrobiology a little bit, and then I'll pass it off to Shana, and then Shana, maybe you can pass it off to Shravan. He can talk about his emergency shelters, things like that. But Shana and I had an astrobiology experiment where we were collecting soil samples while we were out on our EVAs, our extravehicular activities. We came back, we aggregated our soil samples together. We GPS tracked the coordinates, for where we went out on our EVAs, exactly where we pinpointed where we picked up that soil. And we sent those samples out for analysis, just like we would, if we were sending things back to Earth to get analyzed, or maybe even ideally, doing something like that in-house, but for our purposes, we sent them off. And we were able to, we're showing what sort of species we could find in the soil. Well, I mean, we discovered life on Mars, basically, is what ended up happening, because MDRS is in Utah, which ultimately has soil that has some microbes and bacteria and things like that in it. But had we been real, Martian astronauts, that would have been, completely just like so exciting if we had had the results that we had during our mission. But Shane, I said I would pass it off to you, but I took all the main points. If you'd like to catch anything I missed, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I could elaborate for just a moment. So obviously there's life on Earth. So analog missions don't have that level of fidelity, unfortunately. But what was so helpful about these experiments that we did to learn about life on Mars is we could observe where life is most prevalent, what geologic features you're most likely to find the chemical species it is that you're looking for that indicate life. And so you're able to make mission decisions based on this kind of information that you can gather, even here on Earth. And in addition to that, we also got to experiment with some different planetary protection protocols, where we experimented with changing our out the airlock procedures to see if our data would be contaminated or not. In a much larger study with a lot more time, that would be a really exciting way to see how humans can interact with the surface of Mars and still preserve the data quality that's coming in. I think we can pass off to Shravan now to describe yours.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Shayna. So my experiments were more focused on an operational sense. So two main experiments. One of them was with astronaut dexterity. So what we did is we experimented with different types, so different textures, as well as thicknesses and layers of gloves to quantify specifically how these gloves would affect an astronaut on a Mars mission. Especially as we move into the next generation of spacesuit designs, which is a really active area of research, it's important to understand how to design a spacesuit to best fit the astronaut. So we did this by measuring things such as grip strength, and then also just timing how long it takes to do different types of tasks, as well as standardized dexterity tests across the board, just to see how these would affect our gloves. And as expected, we saw that the thicker your glove, the more your dexterity was impacted. But we learned that by adding an additional snug layer within a larger glove, you could increase dexterity by as much as 10%. And then you could do the same amount by adding a glove with ridges or texture on it. Another experiment we did was for the crew to map and catalog different emergency shelters at our areas of scientific interest. So these different geologic features that Shayna mentioned that we were looking for extremophiles in, each crew then identified shelters that could be used by future astronauts in case of any kind of medical or environmental emergency. We then used a different subset of our crew to assess these shelters independently, both in terms of ease of location, and then just to qualitatively describe what makes a successful shelter. Because at the end of the day, safety comes first, and we want to make sure we can keep our crew safe in the unlikely case that an emergency arises. So Julio, I know you briefly mentioned your experiment. In case you'd like to talk through any more results, I'd be happy to pass the floor to you.
Thank you, Shravan, for the great introduction or Passover. As I said beforehand, is that I was looking at different soil compositions of Earth soil and also Martian regolith, different percentages mixed together to see if we could, use what's already there on Mars with what we're bringing over with tried and true methods of traditional agricultural techniques. What we found is that peas, or at least the peas plants that I had planted there in Germany before I came in and transplanted it into my different soil compositions, is that it grows very well in Earth soil. I mean, that's to be expected, but it grows very, very poorly in pure Martian regolith. And even with some small amount of Martian regolith being introduced, it just doesn't retain a lot of water, which is essential to keep the plant healthy. But in essence, I feel like there's still a little bit more work that needs to be done, because we still need to solve the issue of removing the perchlorates that are in Martian soil regolith before we can even get to the point of mixing it in with any of the soil that we bring in from Earth. But I'll pass it over to Alex, because she conducted an experiment in which she used a gel substrate.
Thanks, Julio. Yeah, well, as Ron mentioned in my introduction, I work for a commercial space company called NanoRacks, and we have a sister company that is focused on STEM education. So I was able to honestly take one of these classroom kits that is targeted towards students just learning about space exploration and demo it in the Martian environment and use a lot of the same soil mixtures that Julio was using in his pure soil experiment and integrate it in with the gel substrate plant germination setting. So we recorded those findings and sent them back to the students, who were very excited to, learn kind of what it might look like to be in a simulated Mars environment, doing the same type of activities that they do in their classroom. And as Olivia mentioned earlier, we did really want to be very education focused. My other area of interest for my research is I'm very interested in the interaction between human behavior and extreme environments. So I actually did some qualitative interviews with each of my crewmates and got to learn about how our personal habits and our daily schedules were impacted by the rigor of living on Mars. And, without giving too much away, we basically found out that we did not keep our predicted schedules quite as well as we thought we might. And what Dr. Rupert said earlier, that you don't get done quite as much as you planned. That was quite a learning experience for us. So hopefully something we can build off of for our next mission.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. That was awesome. And so I think what we wanted to talk about next is actually talking about simulation fidelity. So, I mean, obviously with the isolation, now you actually touched a bit on that right now, I think, Alex, with one of your interests. So, I think if you want to kind of leak, I think you and Trevin are going to take this topic point. So if you want to start it out, so let's talk a little bit about simulation fidelity. So the isolation, limited resources, etc.
Well, I think something that can make or break the level of fidelity of your sim is the hardware that you have to work with. So actually, I'll give to Shravan to start off this topic, as he was our crew engineer.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Alex. And I will pass it right back to you in a bit. So we were the first crew returning to MDRS since the start of the pandemic. And Dr. Rupert and the rest of the MDRS crew did a phenomenal job of preparing the station for us and for preparing us for the station. That being said, our goal was to live like Martians, to think and to act like Martians every second of every day. And there was a steep learning curve that led to that, and an adoption of a new set of mentalities. And a prime example of that was resource management. So my research area of interest at MIT is in situ resource utilization. So how we use the resources we find on a planet like Mars to support a human crew. That being said, resources are still limited, and a crew always needs to be mindful of that when doing their day-to-day activities aboard the station. So for example, we had to monitor our water usage for everything like washing dishes to things like taking showers and our botany experiments. In addition to that, our network bandwidth was limited, and we needed to send our daily mission reports to mission support in order to keep, one, the public aware of our activities, and two, communicate any issues that arose with the station. And in a less physical sense, our emotional bandwidth. We were separated from our loved ones for 2 weeks. And we were able to send them updates over email with what we had done every day, but we had to learn how to really lean on each other as a crew. And the last thing I wanted to touch on is that most of the time, crews at MDRS hand over operation of the station to the next crew when they come in. As we were the first crew back in months, we unfortunately didn't have the ability to get it handed over to us, the station. So we had to learn on the fly how to adapt to the situations that arose. Because at the end of the day, the MDRS crew prepared us for the station, but it was still us living in it, and we had to be responsive to that. So a prime example of that is before our extravehicular activities, we had to make sure our spacesuits were fully charged to provide ventilation to our astronauts. So the first night in sim, I spent quite a lot of time getting very familiar with the spacesuits just to ensure that we could keep our astronauts perfectly safe and healthy when braving the Martian desert landscape. And Alex can touch a lot more on the specific operations we took to make sure that our simulation was as high fidelity as possible.
Yeah, thank you for explaining all of that, Shravan. And I think, as we were mentioning, these go very hand in hand. So in my role as the health and safety officer, leading up to the mission and in our pre-mission meetings, which Dylan did an amazing job of organizing to bring us all together, we talked through what we wanted our operational protocols to be, essentially the rules that we would follow while we were in the simulation to make sure we were making it as lifelike as possible, right? Because in these simulations, it really is a lot of what you bring to it that governs the experience that you'll have. So, speaking of the spacesuits, a good example is, we had a very strict checklist before every EVA. I actually performed what, we hope is a pretty comprehensive representation of a medical exam on each crew member before going out on our, Mars walks, essentially. And I did have the power to disqualify anyone who I didn't see as medically fit from going on their Mars walk that day. Thankfully, we all were in healthy condition, but that's something where, like, if you had been disqualified due to some health issue that day, we all agreed ahead of time that, like, we're going to follow that rule in the interest of safety, just like we would on Mars, whether it would be disappointing or not. We also, pulled from a lot of the day-to-day operations that the NASA and international astronauts use up on the International Space Station. So a lot of our day-to-day tasks mirrored, how they might go about one of those tasks. And I feel like it did help us stay in the headspace and, not just be taking a 2-week vacation at a research station, but actually be immersed in the mindset of being on Mars.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. So I wanted to actually, I know Q&A is typically at the end, but I wanted to jump into a question, if you guys don't mind, actually, because it's really relevant to the topic that we're going at. So Eric actually asks, so when you had downtime, did you find you wanted to be alone away from the other crew members, or did you want to spend time socially together? And was it different than how you are in normal life? What are your thoughts on that?
That
Anyone
might
can
be a very
jump in.
good one for Dylan, actually.
I can take a stab. I think it's something that I learned a lot about, actually, during the mission, just what everyone's social battery is, and that can be a very wide range, I think it turns out. And personally, I'm someone who really, I think of myself as someone who doesn't have a limit to their social battery. I do fall on the extroverted side of things, but I think that there's still some independence between that and the amount of time that you can spend with others. And personally, I enjoyed being around the crew, and a few of us I can speak for were able to spend time right after we had finished up in the evening and continue to chat about other things, whereas others prefer to do their own thing. And we did have hours off in the evening. We weren't constantly working up until bed every night, though that was a couple of nights. Yeah, essentially, you have you have some flexibility to be alone if you need to.
Thank you, Dylan. So I think, for our final point, we wanted to actually talk about some key takeaways. So I think, Shayna, if you want to actually take this, take the floor, and after that, we'll jump into some Q&A if we have some time left.
Yeah, absolutely. I can do that. Thank you again for moderating this. This is lovely. So a quick follow-up that I think leads into some of our lessons learned on what Dylan just said is that it's very hard to separate your work and your social life when you are living in one small tin box in the middle of space or Mars. I think many people learned that over the course of the pandemic during work from home times, that you need to learn how to separate those carefully, because it's instrumental to how well you can perform in your day job if you are able to take that time for yourself. So in addition to just all of us having different social batteries, it was fascinating to see how we all handled that in close contact, and was definitely something we improved at over the course of the mission. We had so many takeaways that came from this, both technical ones about what field science is like and personal about what it is like to be a Martian. But at the end of our mission, we distilled it down into 3 major points, which months and months later down the road, I think still represent us perfectly. The first is that we want to emphasize that space is a vacuum without the people in it. This was a wonderful mission. We gained so many skills, we conducted incredible science, and we did learn what it would be like a little bit to live on Mars. But what really makes missions like these incredibly special and memorable is the way that they bring people together, and the way that you all learn new points of view, new skills, new perspectives on the world. That can't be understated at all because it is a way that space brings us all together. And we think that is monumentally important. The second point that I wanted to bring up in the takeaway is that the right stuff is changing. The right stuff back in the day was very much a stereotype of what people thought they had to be an astronaut. But today and going forward, as long duration missions become the norm, especially to further and further away locations like Mars, teamwork is the true right stuff going forward. Thirdly, and finally, we want to emphasize that what we learned and that what we hope every other prospective to MDRS learns is that simulation fidelity is key, and that simulation fidelity is also up to you. The staff at MDRS put together an amazing facility, and you can come into it and learn how to live, just like we said, just like a Martian. But that level of simulation fidelity is up to you, and you get what you put into the experience. It's really an indescribable time to go out there for a couple weeks even for a mission, and you can learn more than you've ever expected. But we encourage everyone who begins to apply and to look into it to apply their full selves and the selves of their entire crew to make this mission as realistic as possible, because the benefits that come back from doing so are just immeasurably high. That is the main takeaways that I had to present and that have impacted all of us so very strongly. But I know we have some photos and some slides to share with you today, as well as answer whatever other questions you have, whether it's about Mars or space or what MDRS is like. So I'll hand it back to you, Ron.
Sorry. Okay. So yeah. So thank you very much, Shannon, for that, and thank you all for. So you did share out some slides with me. So I'm just going to bring those up here and see if I can actually do a better share job than last time. And let me just go over to here. And I know Julio has a copy of these lying around as well, just in case I have an issue. So let me just go over here and we will find it. It is not showing for me. Hey, Julio, do you have your slides available?
Yes, I do, Ron.
Yeah, do you mind sharing yours out? Because for some reason, it's not coming up on my screen to show, even though it's open.
Of course, of course.
Oh, sorry, Julio, maybe while you pull that up, we could start answering some of those audience questions. I'm not able to see a chat really from my end, but
yeah,
one question that might be fun to answer is Eric asked again, what board or card games did you play the most in your social time? Unfortunately, we only brought one, so that answer is kind of simple if anyone from the crew wants to field it.
I do not remember having any time to play any card games. I'm sorry, I must have like totally, threw that free time right out of my mind. Card games is like the magical question. Who's got the answer to that one?
Are we referring to
Against Humanity?
Cards Against Humanity.
Yeah, and I think we had a science pack that we brought along especially for it. That was super cute.
Wow, we must have been in work mode because I don't remember that at all.
To be honest, a lot of our free time was also just spent talking and getting to know each other. When we were the only 6 humans on our planet, it was just absolutely fascinating to dive into our humanity, to just talk about, how we were all dealing with the experience, how this applied to our very different lifestyles back on Earth, and to our different backgrounds, and just to learn from each other. Because what I at least learned is that the crew was such a valuable resource to learn from. We come from such diverse backgrounds, and everyone is so impressive and so passionate about what they're doing that it made me want to learn more and become a more well-rounded person. And I think I speak for all of us saying that we learned so much from each other every minute we spent together.
And I think that definitely applies to one of the other questions in the chat of what would we agree is the most surprising lesson learned. Hopefully we weren't too surprised to find that, it's easy to get along with one another and we were a good fit, but just to agree with what Shravan just mentioned, just the human element of this mission was really, really cool.
Awesome. Now we actually may have some questions coming from different streams and platforms. So maybe Jay, James, Altspace as well. Do you have anything coming from the other areas that I can't see? Okay.
I'll go ahead and jump in if you want.
Oh, there we go. There's Alts. There we go. Go take it away.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nifty.
Yeah, sure. Looking, or as you were each introduced, you had such impressive backgrounds and resumes, and with the recent space launches of tourism, there's kind of a shift that we're seeing where you know, it used to be that the goalpost was always just becoming an astronaut. But it seems like now it's more, there's going to be distinction. There's, you know, becoming an astronaut, but also becoming an astronaut because your skills are going to do something really amazing in space versus, you know, getting to go for the experience. And you've all worked so hard. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your dreams, your visions in your own future there.
Oh my gosh, how much time do we have? I said, oh my gosh, how much time do we have? Like, that's everybody in this group's favorite question. Sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Oh, I don't think I have a direct answer to the question, but I did have just a thought to share on this. One of the recent suborbital astronauts that went up is a mentor of ours from the Matthew Isakowitz Fellowship Program, of which myself, Shayna, Shravan, and Dylan are fellows, and Sarisha. And, you know, I think it's a little reductive to phrase traditional astronaut missions versus modern ones as simply like work versus the experience, because we're now seeing that in these suborbital missions, there's so much opportunity to perform science and, you know, get a lot of scientific benefits out of the, you know, additional time in microgravity essentially that's available on these missions. So that was not an answer to the question asked, but a comment that I think that we all feel is an important distinction. And I think all of us are grateful to see more and more opportunities opening up for, you know, doing work in the environment of space, no matter how that might manifest. So moving on to whoever else wants to take a stab at this question.
Shayna, go for it.
Yeah, and I also just want to highlight, I'm sure it's been talked about in many panels today, but an MDRS alumni, Cyan Proctor, also went to space this year, who was an incredible, you know, side mentor to us as well, answered some questions about what it was like to be an analog astronaut, even after everything with her SpaceX mission started to ramp up. So that connection was also helpful to us. And I completely agree with you, Alex. You know, we can talk about the different kinds of missions that get conducted in space, but ultimately the more people that go to space and have that experience, the better. So being an astronaut doesn't just have to be a job title. It can also be about the kind of experience that you've had and how that shifted your worldview. I know we spent a lot of late nights at MDRS talking about what that would feel like to all of us. And so it's certainly on all of our minds. Also, for a show of hands, how many of us applied to be an astronaut this last cycle? Just to give the audience some thoughts. So we're all there. If they want to give us a chance to go up, I think you'll see some members of Crew 245.
Some of us are not quite old enough yet, but we are getting there.
I hope they don't kick me out of this conference, but I like Earth.
Inspiration 5, baby.
I'll be your ground control.
I wanted to just piggyback off of something that Shane had said about the fact that, you know, because space is becoming more accessible, it changes people's worldview. And this is something that Frank White, who's a space philosopher, has dubbed the overview effect. Going to space changes your perspective of life here on Earth and helps you understand how to better apply your skills and background to benefit life on Earth. And I think that's a mentality we all share. And a great example of this is just on this week's Blue Origin flight, William Shatner, Captain Kirk himself, went up to space. And he came back with these incredibly sobering revelations about how fragile Earth is and how it is our blue marble, our blue planet, and how space exploration helps us learn more about the universe around us. But at the end of the day, we are all citizens here of Earth. And the more people that can go experience that and understand that, you know, we have to come together as humanity to solve these challenging problems facing us together. I think that it's a great step in the right direction. And we would all be happy to be a part of that frontier to knock down those boundaries and make space truly accessible for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Anybody else want to go with that? I know we're kind of getting over time, I think. Luckily, we're actually the last event of the day. So I think they're probably getting used to me going over on things. So that's probably, they said, hey, we should go last. But no, I think
if I can just say, we wouldn't be here talking to everyone, speak to you, Ron, speak to the audience, getting to interact with each other as crewmates, even to this day, if it wasn't for MDRS being a thing. So we're really appreciative for the Mars Society, for the Mars as a research station, and it's amazing how even this society alone is helping to gain access to space.
Awesome. Now, there is one question I think I'll try to sneak in just before we head out, is because I think we didn't talk about this in this chat, is really what you're eating. Because I think, Julio, weren't you actually the crew chef? Or one of the crew chefs? So I wanted to, so what were you guys eating on Mars? I think that's a very interesting question.
I was the unofficial chef. I have a passion for cooking, and I often joke around that if I hadn't gone into engineering, I would have gone into culinary arts, and lo and behold, I'm doing my PhD now. So I'm pretty far into this track, but that doesn't stop me from practicing my skills in the kitchen. Cooking food over at MDRS is a unique challenge because the food that is available to you is very much freeze-dried or has to be rehydrated, and that presents a challenge when it comes to resource management. As Shravan said earlier, is that you have to tightly control how much water that you're using, not only for cooking, but for cleaning and making sure that you have everything else to keep your environment very sanitary. But for cooking, luckily there was a good abundance of flour, and corn flour especially. I come from a Hispanic Mexican background, so I was able to use the corn flour, the masa that was there in the pantry, and had a lot of mileage out of that. And I was able to make empanadas, tortillas, sopes. Even made pizza, as what Dr. Rupert had mentioned, is that pizza seems to be a commonality between all crews, in which if you have the yeast and you have the water and have the flour, you can make the sauce with the freeze-dried or dehydrated tomato powder that's there, as well as the dehydrated cheese, as well as any of the other toppings that you want to throw onto there. But what really surprised me was that I was able to really be very creative with what was available to us. And I think what really helped us was having a large variety of spices so that we can try out different types of dishes. Indian food, we had Mexican food, and we had, classic American food as well. So having a good variety of diet is essential. But I think what was the most important thing for us that really helped our crew obtain success or maintain a high level of energy was our ability to prioritize eating together as a crew, at the very least for breakfast and at the very least for dinner, where we were able to come together and, we could talk shop if you wanted to, but the point was that we all sat down at the same time and we enjoyed sharing a meal. And it's not just the food, it's the company. And having the crew together makes all the difference in the world.
And I think that, you're going to be hungry after a long day of EVAs either way, but truly Julio's amazing cooking really just leveled it up for us. And, as we were mentioning earlier, the human experience, just as much as the scientific experience, was so important for our mission. I think something that's different about our crew than many analog crews is, we didn't just toss together and we're never going to see each other again. It's our intention to remain connected personally and professionally going forward, perhaps going on further missions in the future as a unit and carrying on some of the research that we started on this, our very first analog mission. And, you know, all of those little elements of planning ahead, really talking with each other and respecting one another, and, you know, something as simple as sharing food and playing Cards Against Humanity. I think it really helps with that bond. And, you know, what Shana mentioned from our lessons learned is it really is all about the people in addition to the skills that we may have as people.
Awesome, thank you. Actually, every time I talk to you guys, I don't think coworkers, I think family. You know, just the way that you all the energy and synergy you have together. So it's just fantastic. So I think we should probably wrap it up for this session. I know we could probably keep talking for hours and hours and until people all fall asleep at the keyboard. So I'd like to obviously thank you for coming again. It's been an absolute honor and privilege to moderate this panel and to speak to you all again. So yeah, if you have any closing words or thoughts, the floor is yours. And then I think from there, we will say adieu.
Maybe the last thing we can share, and it was mentioned in the chat as well, anyone in the audience can follow along with the rest of our journey. And this is through the Red Planet People Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And this is really just the beginning. So thank you again for letting us speak to you all. And thanks again to the Mars Society and MDRS.
And we love you, Ron.
Thank you. You guys too.
And if I may say one last thing is, if whether you want to be an astronaut or not, this is a very life-changing experience that anyone can apply to and go through yourself to see what it's like to be in this environment. And if you ever have the curiosity or ever had the thought of like, what would it be like to be an astronaut? Do I have what it takes to be an astronaut? Put yourself in that environment and try it out here first, because an analog expedition is all about seeing what works here on Earth before you actually do it in real life out there.
Yeah, everyone, if I can do it, you can do it.
Okay, thank you guys. I think that's it for us. So Jay or James, whoever's in the still left in the hosting side, I think that's it for us.
Thank you, Ron.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Stay safe and stay
Thank
healthy.
you, Mars Society.
Bye-bye.
Everybody.
Bye, guys.